I still dream of Orgonon. I wake up crying, you're making rain, and you're just in reach. Hello, Internet. Welcome back to the Trumps of Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, the world, solar system, cosmos, and universe about books, movies, music I enjoy, find interesting, or a combination of the two. Today we are talking about Peter Reich's book, A Book of Dreams. This is a book about growing up as the son of the disgraced and somewhat persecuted psychoanalyst, psychiatrist, orgone therapist, and scientist Wilhelm Reich. So I study at an institute in Oslo, which is influenced by Reich, and I borrowed this book from their library last time I was there. I'm going to give it a little introduction about Reich, try and keep it pretty short. Then I'm going to talk about the book, and I would love you to jump in the comments and talk back to me about it if you've read this book, if you're interested in Reich, or if you know anything about this stuff. So I'm going to try and keep it brief, as I say, about Reich, but he was part of the second generation of psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, he had several kind of crown prince figures who were supposed to take over when he died or retired. It ended up in the end being his daughter Anna Freud, but before that there were several others. One of the most famous is Carl Jung. Carl Jung and Freud fell out, and the replacement, more or less, was Wilhelm Reich, who was an extremely gifted, talented, and very intelligent therapist who essentially was the first personality therapist. He was interested in how to give people a therapy that could help them change problems that they had that were based in their character structure or their personality and not so much just on symptoms. And what he noticed was something that I think is kind of indisputable, which is that people's personality traits are observable in the way they carry themselves physically, the way that they look. And he believed that muscular armor is essentially the same as psychological defense, that we tense our muscles to repress our emotions, for example. He fell out of favor with psychoanalysis because he became more and more interested in actually working directly with the body, and he also developed a theory that there was a kind of life energy which he called orgone, which runs through basically everything. And he believed that he could identify or observe the fundamental building blocks of life that he called beyonds, and he believed that these were kind of being spontaneously created, so that life was essentially being created from non-living matter, which was hugely controversial at the time, as it also is now. If you're interested in this part of Reich's career, you should check out the book Wilhelm Reich Biologist by James Strick, because he goes through in great detail Reich's experiments and his notebooks, and Strick is an actual scientist, so he is well placed to understand these things, far more well placed than me. What Strick is very able to demonstrate in any case is that Wilhelm Reich's experiments were never, there were very few attempts to replicate them. They were never really replicated with the same conditions or the same equipment, and that most of the people who very vehemently attacked him didn't understand his work. What happened eventually is that he moved from Europe to America, and the persecution continued. In America, he was essentially persecuted by the Food and Drug Administration and perhaps by the FBI. He was jailed and he died in jail. Towards the end of his life, he had some pretty strange ideas. He built some machines, for example, called Cloudbusters, which the Kate Bush song based on this book is named after. He believed that he could channel orgone energy through these machines and affect weather. This sounds very weird, but people at the time, some people at least, seemed to believe that he could do it. He also believed there was a conspiracy against him. It's hard to believe that there wasn't some kind of conspiracy, since many of his papers were burnt, and these cabinets that he made that were supposed to help people, by you could sit in them and they would channel energy, they were called orgone accumulators, these were destroyed. So that's basically like a crash introduction to Wilhelm Reich. He's a very, very interesting figure. I encourage anybody interested in him to read about him. And if you're interested in his psychological ideas, read the book Character Analysis. It's fantastic. He also wrote a very good book called The Mass Psychology of Fascism, which is as relevant now as it has ever been. Okay, so to get into Peter Reich's book, this book is written by a man in his late 20s. He was a journalist at the time. He'd also done some work as a social worker. He'd been in the army. And he'd more or less repressed his childhood up until the time that he tried to write this book. And so the start of the book is kind of seeing Wilhelm Reich through the eyes of a child. And the relationship between Peter and Wilhelm, initially at least, seems really beautiful, very warm. The father obviously has a lot of love for his son, and the son really looks up to his father and wants his respect and his attention and his love. However, in the background of this, there are some kind of weird things going on, like Peter has a glow-in-the-dark yo-yo, and his father, Wilhelm, makes him bury it because he believes that the glow-in-the-dark material is like bad energy. And something has happened where Reich has done some kind of experiment that has made everybody ill, and most people have left, including Peter's mother. Also, there are apparently flying saucers above them over their land that they're living on, and they are trying to use the cloudbusters to kind of send them away. And Wilhelm seems to believe that there's some kind of aliens, and maybe the government know about them, maybe they don't, and the aliens are creating bad energy and it's affecting the planet. So Peter believes that he's in some kind of cosmic war. It's hard when you read it not to think that at this point the stress of being continually hounded and persecuted and attacked for his ideas had tipped Wilhelm Reich over into a point of paranoia, maybe psychosis. So this is partly a book about a boy growing up within his father's kind of system of understanding, and then when the father goes to prison and dies, the boy is kind of left alone in a world that doesn't believe any of the things that he grew up believing. There are parts at the beginning where Reich is talking to Peter in ways that I actually understand as someone who's influenced by his work, about, you know, trying to keep the body soft and not kind of tense, and how meeting aggression in others, like if you meet it with softness instead of with hardness, then it's a more effective and also more healthy way of dealing with it. And he talks about keeping your belly soft. This is all really quite beautiful until you get to the point in the book, about 2/3 of the way through, where Peter describes the orgone therapy, the kind of massage therapy that his father did on him as a child, and how painful and terrifying it was for him. And it really does just sound like child abuse. Equally, this kind of authoritarian style that Reich had has obviously been problematic for Peter. And he talks towards the end of the book about how he resents his father for instilling in him a kind of belief in the military that was coherent with Reich's personality and his era as a man of the 19th century, but that was actually incoherent with Reich's philosophy, that was in many ways a kind of philosophy of life, love, almost anarchistic. There's also an aspect to this book where Peter Reich resents or resists being the son of Wilhelm Reich, and yet when he writes this book trying to figure out who he is, he has to contend with the fact that this has been a fundamental and formative part of his personality. Towards the end of the book, he tries to write about whether he is able to reject Reich's view of the world, but he's working as a journalist at one point on an island outside of New York, and one night many people call in and they've seen UFOs, and the newspaper tell them, do not run this story. So he says, how can I know, you know? And then throughout the 20th century, you know, there were UFO reportings constantly in America. And he's like, well, what is this? And maybe my father knew more about this or understood more about this than most people are ready for. Certainly when you read about Reich's life and his belief in the body and sexuality and life energy and the way that people reacted so strongly and so angrily and so in such a rejecting fashion towards his ideas and him as a person, it's very easy to understand how somebody who had been in his orbit would feel that they had to either buy into the entirety of his worldview or reject everything. And this is a problem for anybody who's influenced by Reich or anybody who's interested in his work. Everybody is always interested in at what point does his work go beyond something that I can accept, and everybody draws the line at a different place. He talks about this and as a difficulty where he can never really judge his father's work because nobody ever understood it. And he says that he didn't understand it either because his father had made him like a cosmic captain in a war against evil. And he said that really understanding about orgone energy meant more than just agreeing and nodding and being a cosmic captain. It meant going through deep emotional changes, incorporating them into one's character. And he says, I understood that, but how could I go about living a regular life when a flying saucer might come down any day and pick me up? I don't know what happened in the skies of Arizona in 1954. Does anybody? When the argument breaks down, people say, well, he was crazy, making insanity the only way to deal with those far out issues. Hitting below the belt is a good American sport. They attacked him, not his ideas. They want my penis, he said. Was he wrong? And in fairness to my American friends, Reich was attacked in this way in Norway also, and he was more or less hounded out of the country. In this book, if you read it, you will not find a hagiography of Reich. You will not find him as a hero. You will find him as a very conflicting figure at a point in his life when he was maybe at his worst. And it's really a kind of tragic, beautiful, and sad book about a boy growing up in a world he cannot understand, semi-abandoned by his parents, with a mother who left him behind and then a father who died. And also a father who was so focused on his particular worldview that the only way for his son to connect with him was to join him inside it. I think A Book of Dreams is very well written also. It's structured in a way where it's kind of associative, especially the first half tells the story through the perspective that Peter Reich has had an accident and he's being given gas and he's in this kind of drowsy state, going in and out of dreams related to his childhood. That is maybe the strongest part of the book, the first part. The second part is like more him as an adult trying to come to terms with things. And you get a sense also of what a troubled individual he has become. He kind of screams and throws up every day, trying to purge something. If you've read this book, as I said at the beginning, I would love to hear from you. If you're interested in Reich, please write me a comment. I hope that you've enjoyed this short discussion of the book, and I hope to see you again soon.